because of the rise of digital and how many marketers are using digital channels to market and to then measure those things, we can get really, really, really attached to the reporting from those platforms and kind of ignore the other sources that are in the dark funnel that are feeding into your customers' purchase decisions.
Hello, and welcome to The Marketing Architects, a research-first podcast dedicated to answering your toughest marketing questions. I'm Elena Hingle. I run the marketing team here at Marketing Architects, and today I'm joined by my two co-hosts, Angela Voss, our CEO, Rob DeMars, our Chief Creative Officer, and a very special guest, Jordan Rossler, our Director of Analytics.
Jordan, J-Dog. He is our most experienced podcaster of anyone at Marketing Architects, finally joining us, going to show us up.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Yeah, we used to be on a podcast about a topic much more serious than marketing, fantasy football. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. Good to see you guys.
You need all your memorabilia in the background. I don't feel like I get you. You know, you're such a sports guy.
We just moved into this house and I'm still getting around to the decorating part. I've got plenty of sports memorabilia, way too much, honestly. And so most of it's in bins, but we'll get some up here in the near future.
I am a freaking Jordan fanboy. Like, I am so excited that you're on this podcast, Jordan. I mean, it's like our first celebrity guest that we've had is Jordan's big brain. So this is going to be fun. Let's get this going.
Let's do it.
Thanks, guys. You're making me blush.
Awesome. Thank you, Jordan, for joining us here today. And we're back with some thoughts on some recent marketing news. As always, we're trying to root our opinions in data, research, and what drives business results. And today we're going to be covering a concept that's relatively new, but has become fairly well known in a short period of time, especially in the B2B marketing community. And that would be what is known as the dark funnel. So I'm going to kick us off, like I always do, by providing some background on our topic. So it's hard to trace back the origins of this term, the dark funnel. Some people attribute it to Sixth Sense, which is an ABM platform. Others say it was first mentioned in an article by Krista La Riviere in 2016. But wherever it came from, it has been popularized in the B2B marketing community by people like Chris Walker, and it's really accelerated in use and popularity in the last few years. So what is it exactly? It's a concept used in marketing and sales to describe the anonymous and untraceable journey that potential customers take before making a purchasing decision. So the dark funnel emerged in the digital marketing industry as marketers realized the significance of understanding and tracking customers during the early stages of their buying process. So the dark funnel specifically refers to the stage of the buyer's journey where prospects engage with a company's content or marketing touchpoints without providing identifiable information. So there's an endless number of information sources that make up the dark funnel. According to marketing profs, these could include word of mouth, such as your friend recommending a product to you, dark social, which could be direct messages, comments, group threads, paid social views, reviews, third-party communities in platforms like Slack and Reddit, and even podcasts like this one. A potential customer might listen to our show, eventually decide to work with us, but until someone invents some sort of audio pixel, podcast listeners remain in the dark funnel. So you can suss out dark funnel measurement through metrics like direct traffic, paid and organic searches, and we're going to dive deeper into all of that with our guest Jordan. But if I could summarize things here, I'd say that the dark funnel really represents the untraceable activities your potential customers engage in before deciding to purchase something. So there's some debate over how word of mouth differs from dark social and dark social differs from the dark funnel. But I think some of that debate is just sort of distracting from the main point here, which is that marketing measurement isn't simple. There's many things that are influencing your buyers that you aren't aware of. And ignoring these influences might cause you to misattribute what is really going on with your company, what's really growing your company. So, Ange, I want to kick it over to you first. This concept of the dark funnel is more popular among B2B marketers, and I often hear it described as a B2B phenomenon, but this same sort of challenge, it exists for B2C marketers too, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think, while the term gained popularity within the B2B community, the underlying idea of untraceable and anonymous customer journeys applies to both, B2B and B2C. I think the level of consideration and the length, right, of a customer journey path definitely plays a role in how dark your dark funnel gets. Generally, B2B buying paths are longer than the average consumer buying path. And that's why we usually think of the dark funnel in the context of B2B. But if you think about your own buying behavior as a consumer, you'd find that you're probably an attribution model's nightmare. And with, the rise of GDPR and privacy changes and cookie blockers, the dark funnel will likely grow even more. I think about like mattress shopping as an example. It used to be that you'd have to go to a brick and mortar store, and now you've got hundreds of options, e-commerce related, and that's not a light purchase. It's not just a heavy investment, but it's also something you're going to sleep on every single night. And so there's a lot of forums and even social networks, to your point, a lot of, asking of your friends and family, what type of mattress. I've been asked that question probably 20 times in the last, 5 years, something like that. What type of mattress do you have and what do you love?
Right. And Jordan, I wanted to ask you, have you heard of this term, the dark funnel? Because I hear about it all the time, but I'm very deep in, B2B marketing podcasts. So you're an expert in marketing attribution in general. Have you ever heard of it before?
Yeah, honestly, I hadn't heard of the specific term dark funnel, but I think the concept of what it is something that really I kind of realized we're talking about almost on a daily basis with all of our clients, right? I mean, it's hard enough to already correctly attribute channels that are pretty trackable and traceable. And then you start bringing in things like, television, which is what we're talking about mostly, but all the things that you were mentioning too. That's kind of what keeps us up at night on the analytics side. That's what's keeping our clients up at night. Now we just have a name for it as the dark funnel. So I'll probably use that in client calls moving forward because it's definitely a very real thing in the marketplace today.
And I would think that measurement has gotten better, right, over time in recent years, just because of new technology we have. But do you think that it's actually become worse? Like this dark funnel, has it become, quote unquote, darker with the rise of digital and the different privacy changes? Or how do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the privacy changes definitely play a role in terms of the information that we have. I think the other thing that I've seen too is because of the rise of digital and how many marketers are using digital channels to market and to then measure those things, we can get really, really, really attached to the reporting from those platforms and kind of ignore the other sources that are in the dark funnel that are feeding into your customers' purchase decisions. And so it's kind of almost created like a false set of confidence for some, CMOs and marketing managers out there where it's like, well, I have data telling me that this is working. I'm just going to optimize more and more towards that when you don't have data out there to measure the things like TV, podcasts, these social sites, all of those, blogs, forums that Andrew's mentioning, all those things are touch points that are feeding into your customer journey. Like Andrew said, think about it less from the marketing seat, more from the customer journey. There's so many things feeding into it. And if only some of them are measurable and those things happen to be the digital ones, there's kind of like I said, that false set of confidence reliance on the digital end. And that's something we're kind of battling and discussing with a lot of our clients on a daily basis.
So it's almost like as we've gotten better at measurement and as we've gotten more dependent on different types of measurement, it sort of makes the dark funnel, I get confused whether it's dark funnel is light or darker, but it almost makes it a bigger challenge, right?
Because very Star Wars, the dark funnel. Dun, 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 dun.
I know we need some ominous music playing.
When we bring up this, this idea of the dark funnel, it typically comes with this debate over, okay, not only what it is, but how do we measure it? And Jordan, you spend your time measuring TV, which when I was thinking about just this concept of the dark funnel, I thought, okay, a lot of this is similar to measuring TV because TV, you can't attribute the impact of television, traced back to a single airing. There's all these things that happen that impact someone's purchase after they see a TV ad. So with that in mind, I was hoping you could maybe give us some strategies or techniques. What could marketers do to shine a light on what's happening in the dark funnel?
Yeah, I think it's important to start from a position of humility and saying we don't know the right answer and there's no perfect answer out there. And so I think with that as your kind of starting paradigm, the approach that we've talked about, and I know you guys have talked about it on the podcast before, is this idea of multiple models. We know that there's no perfect model out there. You can run an MTA, you can run an MMM, you can run ACR measurement, you can do all these things and have the greatest techniques out there. But if you're only doing one and leaning really hard into it, you're kind of ignoring the limitations that are out there with each model. And so I think we know that, because none of them are perfect, at least the combination of all of them together, if they all kind of start to say the same thing, you're seeing trends across all of them that are, one's a top-down approach, one's a bottom-up approach, one's, incorporating year-over-year stuff, one of them isn't, and only looking at today's data. When you start to see the similarities there, that's kind of when we know we're onto something. So I think that's an approach that we take, is if you as a marketer are looking only at one specific data source and one specific report, that report's probably decent, but it's also probably missing something. And so, like I said, approaching it with that attitude of like humility and knowing what we don't know and leaning into that, I think is important. And I think how do we color that in is the big question. And I think things like surveys of how'd you hear about us, and asking it as a what brought you here today, but also like we ask a source of awareness question in our brand studies where give me all the places you've ever seen and heard of our brand, just to start to learn of, 5% of people are saying podcasts, 7% of people are saying blogs. How can we try to lean into that and learn more about our customers and their path to purchase ultimately? And it's kind of coloring it in with all those different things where I think you can just get smarter as a marketer. And maybe there's not a golden ticket answer of you should spend X budget on this, but it at least starts to show you all the places you should be looking and kind of incorporating into your models and knowing what models are bringing in what and what models are strong at measuring certain channels versus others, and having that multi-pronged kind of dashboard approach rather than one single metric of good, bad, or otherwise to make your marketing decisions.
Jordan, don't you feel like in some ways, like marketing comes full circle? Back in the day before IP tracking existed and ACR technology existed, like there was a focus on just incrementality, right? A/B market tests, lifts above baseline, things like that. And to some degree, it feels like we've swung one way and now we're kind of swinging back the other way. Do you feel that too?
Absolutely. And I honestly think that those more traditional ways of doing it, like you mentioned, are still our most reliable ways of truly getting to incrementality. There's so many other things that you have to take into account when doing those more technologically advanced things. And I think there's a time and a place for those, and we're absolutely trying to lean in and incorporate those. But I think a good old fashioned A/B market test of, test and control is still a really good and valuable way of measuring incrementality of TV or whatever other channel you're trying to measure. Obviously, some aspects of the dark funnel, like a blog, you're not going to go out and test locally because you don't have control over that. And so that's a piece of the dark funnel that never is going to be quote unquote testable. But I do think, to your point, Ange, like we do kind of come full circle and there's this next huge wave of, marketing model X, Y, and Z. But at the end of the day, it's like, but it doesn't really incorporate this, this, and this. So we're kind of back to let's do a local test and see what, pops there. So 100% agree with that.
Jordan, speaking of kind of keeping it simple, I wanted to ask you more about the How Do You Hear About Us surveys, because this is something that in B2B marketing is becoming more and more popular. And I think it's been around with B2C marketers for longer. But do you think, how valuable are those? And is one reason why they're so valuable because they're a pretty easy way to set up, more like different types of measurement? Or what do you think about those surveys in general?
I like them. I think, like with everything, right? We're saying there's no perfect model and there are limitations there. But what I like about it is you give the dark funnel a chance in the marketing mix, right? Like you said at the beginning, there's a lot of these marketing channels or ways that people are hearing and interacting with your brand that aren't traceable with some sort of click, UTM path and all the, cookies and all of that stuff. And so it gives you a chance to say, actually, I was talking to my parents about it and they brought it up, or actually I, heard about it from a coworker or whatever the case may be. And kind of, like I said, educates you on where people are hearing about your brand. I think the limitation that we've been running into is certain parts of that, like multiple touch points feed into every single purchase, and you're forced to pick one on a lot of those surveys. And so that now you as the consumer are trying to do the mental calculus of, which one actually, played more into, and that's assuming people actually stop and think about it and don't just click the thing that brought them there today, which was an online search or a Facebook post or Instagram post or whatever the case may be. So I think those, again, are some of the strengths and limitations of it. But I think it behooves you not to have one on your site because, again, it's just another source of learning. Why would you not learn and not get that information as long as you're coupling it with other things? I think that's the approach we recommend for all of our clients. And, 9 times out of 10, at least, it provides very, very valuable information that they really can't get from anywhere else.
Right. So that brings us back to this idea of it's a good idea, but it's part of multiple models, right? And I want to put you on the spot a little bit with this question, but say you're running a D2C brand. They're running some digital marketing, but they're pretty early on in their journey. We talk about the value of multiple models. Getting really practical here, do you have a recommendation of what they should start with? Maybe they're starting to add TV. Like, what sort of attribution models do you think a marketing team should have set up?
Yeah, honestly, I think if your marketing medium, whatever you're trying to test and validate, can be run and tested and turned on and off at a local level, like we were talking about with Angela's comment earlier, I honestly think that's a pretty good gold standard for just it doesn't force you to go through any sort of click path. It doesn't force you to respond in any certain time window. We're going to have marketing channel X in these markets, and we're not going to have it in those markets, and we're going to compare the differences across them. I think that's a really good way to try to measure that incrementality, because anything else that's tied to click paths and this and that and all these digital things are kind of good, but not great when it comes to incorporating all that. It's going to be more directional. And like I said, there's going to be limitations and things based on how people are kind of forced to get to your site, where certain channels are going to skew really good and other channels are going to skew really bad in something like an MTA or an MMM because of the correlations and all those things there. And so I think a good old fashioned local test is a gold standard that a lot of our clients are using. We're trying to do that as much as we can for TV, but I think other channels that you have control over from a geo, zip code, whatever standpoint, that type of test makes a ton of sense.
Right. And that comes back to setting up your test for success, right? I know Matt mentioned that in the previous episode, that the worst thing that can happen is you pour all this money into a marketing test and you don't know whether it worked or not.
Absolutely. I think test design is like a very underrated thing that doesn't get talked about enough, because I think we all assume like, oh, we're marketers, we're researchers, we're analytics people. We know how to set up a good test. But again, probably 9 times out of 10, we'll launch a new channel, mainly TV for us, and we're seeing huge spikes in traffic or revenue. And we're like, wow, this has got to be TV, right? And our clients are like, well, actually, we started 3 other channels all that same week. Like that's not going to cause a problem, right? And it's like, all right, guys, like we with more intentional thought around test design, I think you'd get a lot better insights out of this rather than us wondering, well, was it TV or was it one of those other 3 channels? And so I think stopping and thinking about how do we structure these tests in the best way from a true test control standpoint. What markets are you going to use? Are there certain markets that shouldn't be included? Are there certain people that shouldn't be included in this? Whatever the case may be, stopping and thinking about that. I mean, there's a lot of times where people will run a test in TV and come back with no answers at the end of it because of how poorly it was set up. And so I think that's something we try to come alongside our clients to ultimately prevent. But I think you can do that in a lot of other channels as well.
I think that ties back to that sense of security that you have if you do have some type of model in place, or the provider that you're working with is going to provide a model. You're like, okay, well, that's covered. But unfortunately, more often than anyone would like to admit, when brands come to us, maybe they've launched television, they had a model in place, they actually thought it was working right out of the gate really well in some cases, and then months go by and 1 + 1 + 1 ends up equaling something like 1.5, and they don't have enough orders to justify the level of success that they thought they were seeing, and so then they're left with those question marks.
If you're a marketer, you already know TV advertising is powerful, but launching TV is not exactly easy. That's why Marketing Architects rebuilt TV advertising to help brands drive profitable growth. Introducing All-Inclusive TV, a revolutionary approach to TV advertising where all you pay for is media. Marketing Architects provides everything else needed for success, from stunning creative to results you can trust. Visit marketingarchitects.com to learn more. Speaking of testing, wanted to segue into a question for Rob. And he's our creative on the podcast. And at some agencies, creatives are really separate from these marketing measurement topics. But as someone who's led creative at a performance agency, Rob, I know you've been closely connected to the sales results of the creative that you've produced. So I'm curious, have you heard of this term, the dark funnel, and how do you think it impacts creative messaging when we might not know exactly what's happening on someone's path from seeing your ad to purchasing your product or service?
First of all, I thought the dark funnel was how people buy meth on the internet. So no, I definitely hadn't heard that term before. And I love this conversation because I think it comes back to, one of the oldest quotes in advertising, right? I know that 50% of my advertising works. I just don't know which 50%, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is kind of a way of branding that insecurity we have as marketers, especially in an age where we value precision and we have all these tools and everything else, but there's still that, portion we can't quite lay claim to. So, we call it the dark funnel, but we've been struggling with this, question for a long time, and including creative. It's like, God dang it. How do you know, which message is going to work? How do we set ourselves up for success, as Jordan was talking about? How do we set that test up for success? Well, one of the ways that, creatives can contribute to that equation is through pretesting. Now, I'm going to get a lot of hate messages from other creatives on pretesting because they think that that's, taking some of the art out of the game, but there's just so much we can learn. Especially on, the deterministic side of, is this thing going to drive response or not, by leveraging pretesting. And so I think for those, creatives out there who are open to that opportunity, it's our way of contributing to shedding some light on the dark funnel.
I mean, I kind of, it's interesting when you think about, we do have a lot of evidence and documentation and data to support the fact that TV will drive an immediate response to a client's website, and we can track, that behavior really well. But you think about sort of the complexity when you're thinking about the dark funnel related to, viral creative. If we think about the Bud Light, what's up, and how many people were talking about that. I know I'm aging myself and bringing that example.
That was really good.
But
more like, what's up?
Yeah, thank you. But how viral that went and how much communication that created from a consumer standpoint, and what value did that have? It's like, that's what you want. That's free PR, right, for your brand. And yet it really muddies, what might be happening from a performance standpoint.
Right. So I think if I can try to summarize us here, I would say that, the dark funnel is definitely a reality. It's probably one that's existed for, as Rob said, since marketing started, we've all been dealing with some kind of dark funnel. But I think the positive thing about it is it gives marketers just another way to talk about the challenges that they face, and also to acknowledge that marketing has impacts that might not be measured by just one model, which brings us back to this belief we have in investing in multiple models in order to determine what's working. That's it for this episode of The Marketing Architects. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, and if you find our show valuable, please leave us a rating and review. And if you want to know what the research says about some recent news, you can contact us at marketingarchitects.com/podcast. Now go forth and build great marketing. You just called it the dark tunnel.
Ooh, the dark tunnel.
That's really scary.
Walk down the dark tunnel.
I'm having tunnel vision right now. Okay, I'll start that part over.